All right, Jason Laux here, coming at you from the closing table here in Wellington, Florida. And I've got a big update for you on what's coming up in foreclosures, specifically foreclosure investing for 2026. So the big news here is foreclosures in the fourth quarter of 2025, where I'm filming this video, right, a few days before Christmas. But in the fourth quarter of 2025, foreclosures are already up from 2024 by 32%. All right. It's kind of snowballed here as we get towards the end of the year. Starting in October, things went basically nuts, like I've been telling everybody they were about to since earlier this year. And it's from a convergence of a number of factors, but to be really specific, foreclosures are up 32% in the end of 2025 over 2024, and that number is going up. So they're going to be even more foreclosures in 2026 because of four major market factors that are all hitting the market at the same time. Have already hit. So this is not conjecture. I'm not talking about something that's going to happen. I'm talking about something that has already happened and will continue through all of 2026, actually, for the next few years. The number one factor is the higher interest rates are finally catching up to people. So interest rates went up and have just come down a little bit. There were three small Fed rate cuts in 2025, but they were not enough to, they weren't big cuts. I think 0.75% or 1% total, something like that. But the higher rates that I'm talking about are the rates from the 2020 lending era. So beginning of 2021 is when interest rates went up dramatically. And that is when people's ability to buy a lot of house went down. Remember, most people, when they buy their house based on how much monthly payment they can afford, not necessarily the price tag on the house. Can they borrow the money on a monthly basis is their deciding factor. So when interest rates started to go up, it caused the market to kind of level off a little bit, right? Some places dipped a little bit and then kind of, cruise along. Other places just went slower. Like, I'm in South Florida. Our market didn't crash at all. It actually went up, even though interest rates went up. But most of the country, kind of leveled off a little bit, slowed down a little bit, whatever you want to call it. And that got, as interest rates continued to climb, the market continued to, some were going up a little, and then they kind of flattened out. Anyway, the bottom line is those higher rates mean that if someone falls behind on payments, they cannot refinance to make the loan current. In other words, they can't get a new loan to erase the loan that's in foreclosure by tapping into the equity of the house, which they had been able to do when rates were falling. But in a rising interest rate market, if they can't afford this payment on a low interest rate, on less of a loan on lower interest rate, they certainly won't be able to afford more of a loan on a higher interest rate, and the bank knows it, and the bank won't give them the loan. Okay. So people have not been able to refinance and get out of foreclosure, which they had been able to do in the falling rates. So when rates were going down from, 6.5, 7, 6, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 5, all the way down to where they were in the threes. And some people even got mortgages in the twos, 2.8. I know quite a few people got. Well, when that happens, if the market goes up and now rates are 6.5%, you can't refinance, or your interest on your payment will double, more than double in some cases. So that means that people, when they would fall behind, for several years there, 2018, 19, 20, even before that, 17, 16, as rates were falling, people were able to kind of solve the problem themselves. Well, now they can't solve the problem themselves. They need our help. So the first factor is the higher interest rates. The higher interest rates that have gone up since 2021 has led to a situation where people cannot refinance to get out of it. Well, what's the next thing they try? The next thing they tried, and until very recently, were successfully tried, was forbearance agreements. So forbearance agreements were just a deal that the bank made with the owner of the property to not foreclose if the owner of the property, in good faith, did what they could to pay the bills. Well, these forbearance programs were backed by the federal government until 2025, when all of those were repealed. So, or not repealed, they expired. They were only supposed to be for a short period of time to help people who got in trouble because of COVID. So they weren't supposed to be permanent. And so, they just expired. They ran out. So if a person got into financial trouble because of COVID in 2020 or 2021, they were making deals with the banks, were making deals because the federal government was backing. They didn't have to just trust that the seller was going to do what they say. Well, those forbearance agreements are all over, and they all ended in one day. Okay. So the beginning part of 2025, those forbearance programs expired. All those properties that were maybe that were some of them many months behind. So I saw some pretty scary stats on how many were 10 months or more behind, but they all immediately became foreclosures. They went from the bank's interested to the bank is definitely going to foreclose. All right, and that's piling up now. So the end of the forbearance agreements is the second of the four major factors that are all coming together right now. The third is natural disasters. So if you recall, at the end of 2024 and even in the beginning of 2025, we had huge fires in California and out west. We had two hurricanes, one on the southeast and one on the east coast. There was just thousands and thousands and thousands of properties that were suddenly the people couldn't make the payments. Okay, FEMA was getting involved and all that stuff. So not only are those properties foreclosures, but the side effect of that is the banks that were making those loans are not getting revenue. So they're looking for, how can we solve this problem? And so, they're not playing ball with the sellers like they might have if they were flush over here. They don't have to be so hardcore over here, but when they're suffering all around, the banks are it changes the way the bank has to do it changes their policy. It changes what they have to do in order to collect. All right. It also means a lot of people, especially here in South Florida, when the big hurricane came through, the people get an insurance check. They get a check for 40, 50, 60, 70, $80,000 to fix the repairs on their flooded house with no roof. Okay. Well, a lot of them, it takes so long from the time that they file the claim till they get the check that they're not in love with that house anymore. And they've got a check for 80 grand in their hand. And if they sell the house as is, whatever money they make is just on top of that 80,000. So it makes it an easy decision for them to make to take the cash offer from buyers like us. So we've got an increase in foreclosures on that end because they don't want to pay the bills on a house that they're not in love with, that already got hit by a hurricane and had the roof taken off. Okay. Or, flooded out. Look at Tennessee. Like the houses are permanently damaged unless someone gets in there and fully restructures them, And then the fourth factor that's motivating the foreclosure industry right now, that's causing more foreclosures, is high prices. High prices make it harder for buyers to buy, but high prices also make it harder for a seller to sell and have enough equity to go buy another house. In other words, if the interest rate is high and the price is high, they won't be able to sell for enough that the profit will let them buy another house free and clear. Okay. So if you are going to move from one house to the next house, and the next house is going to cost you twice as much in your monthly payment, or twice as much interest at least, it doesn't make financial sense. And a lot of people can't do it. Well, the problem is some of those people are behind on payments. So if you're behind on payments and you can't get the house sold, and you need to get it sold in order to get out of the trouble, more so necessarily than they need the equity out of the house, but they need that too. They don't want to give up all of it anyway. But that higher pricing and higher interest rate environment makes it tough for people who don't know how to sell, people who maybe 6% to a real estate agent might be a big chunk of change out of what they're what they're needing. But those high prices make them harder to sell, means taking a lateral move. And let's say you owe 50% on what the house is worth. Well, if you sell it for 100% and you take the 50%, you'd have to buy a house that's half as expensive as the one you've already got to get out of the trouble. And since they're already in foreclosure, they've got all those late payments and no bank will make them a loan to do the next deal, to buy the next house. Okay. So they're stuck and they need help from someone like us who knows what we're doing to fix the situation. Sometimes we're fixing houses like the ones we're talking about from the natural disasters. Sometimes we're fixing the situation. Pretty house, ugly house. Ugly house, you fix the house. Pretty house, you fix the situation. Okay. But there's also three things happening right now that are driving our profits per deal through the roof, our overall profits through the roof. Okay. So for us as in foreclosure investors, it's like Christmas. You know what I mean?
Hey, Jason Louts here. Just wanted to take a quick time out and say, if you're loving this video, please do me a favor, thumbs up, like it, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss the future ones. And if you want even more free videos, head on over to secretlenders.com, secretlenders.com. You got many free videos there for you, all kinds of free training and stuff on that blog. And also, I'll send you a free full-length training on where to get the funding for your deals and how to use it once you get it. So if that sounds good to you, head on over to secretlenders.com and I'll see you there.
Those three things that are increasing our profits right now in the foreclosure game are some of the same motivating factors that's causing the crisis in the first place. Number one, high prices and now falling interest rates. Okay, so interest rates, remember I said there's been 3 rate cuts so far in 2025. They're anticipating a couple more at least in 2026. But those high prices, when interest rates come down a little bit, you have buyers who were just priced out of the market who now are in the market. So is it a big difference? Well, if interest rates go from 7% down to 5.5%, that's 20% more buying power that those people have on the interest on their loan. So it might translate to 10 or 15% in the value of a property, which means we can push our values up. Okay. Also, you're seeing buyers getting back into the market because they're seeing jobs coming back. They're seeing the interest rates ease off a little bit. They're seeing, hey, it might be, 5, 10, 15 years before I can get in the game if I don't get in now. All right. So we're seeing those high prices, our profits per deal, because the prices of the house are higher, are more. All right. And we're seeing the buyers want to get in. And that's the other thing. We're in a balanced market. Remember, the market was going up quite a bit until 2021, 2022, when higher interest rates caused it to start to level off. All right. So most markets in our country are flat right now. Because they might be up 1 or 2%, they might be down 1 or 2%, but they're basically flat. Well, here's the thing. Some people say, that's terrible. Real estate's not going up. I need real estate to go up. I don't want it to be flat. Well, I like rising markets too. But top flat, high prices, and a flat market is the best market to flip properties for a profit, because the profits per deal are the highest they're ever going to be, because the property values are the highest they're ever going to be, right? If they come back down a little bit after, but not ever, but in the meantime, compared to rents, compared to inflation, compared to the dollar, the prices are as high as they're going to get. So the profits per deal are phenomenal because they're as high as they're ever going to be. At the same time, in a market like that, when you have buyers coming back into the market because interest rates just came down a little bit, that easing of the market, that easing of making it easy for them to buy, listen to how easy it is. Right now, in a USDA loan, your buyers can get qualified for and buy the house with $1,000 out of pocket. $500 for an appraisal and $500 for an inspection is all they have to pay. Okay, no money down at all, and the seller can pay their closing costs, so they don't need any more out of pocket than that. All right. FHA is 3.5% down, and the seller can pay their closing costs. So right now, the government's making it so easy. They're talking about making 50-year mortgages so that the principal portion is even smaller to make it more affordable. Point is, they're bending over backwards to get people into houses. Okay. So in that balanced market of buyers and sellers, you have buyers who want to buy. You have motivated sellers who want to sell. On a rising market, when the market's hot, there aren't that many motivated sellers, and everybody complains, I can't find a deal. When the market's soft, everybody says, oh no, I don't want to buy anything because I don't want to get stuck with it. Well, don't wish, it was easier. There is no magical market. They either go up, down, or sideways. Okay. There's no market where it's easy to find them, like crazy easy and easy to sell them. But there are markets where if you're good at it, it's a snap. It's super simple. Okay. And that market is a balanced market. A top flat market is when the property prices are high and there's buyers and sellers. And a bottom flat market is when property values are low and there's buyers and sellers. Which one would you rather flip in, when the profits per deal are the highest or the profits per deal are the lowest? Well, of course, the highest. So now is a great time to start taking some profits from your deals. Can you own them long-term? Of course you can. Do they cash flow? If that's the only question. But do you want to? Maybe now is when you want to, stockpile some reserves. All right. And then the third thing, this is something that only people who've been deep in the game for a long time probably even recognize or think of, but it's the churn rate. Okay. How often do people buy and sell a house, buy and sell their own house, their own personal residence in your market area? Okay. In places like South Florida, where I live, Southern California, people in Miami, they just sell their house and move to another part of Miami. Okay. I'm not in Miami exactly, but I'm not that far away. I'm 60 miles away. So, in my circle of friends, I know plenty of people who bought a house, changed their mind, and bought a different house, sold it and bought a different house, right? That's just very common for people to move every 5 to 7 years around here. Okay. It's, 7 to 10 years statistically in the country is about when people want to sell anyway, because life happens. Does that make sense? Well, as we go into 2026, we're 6 years after that low interest rate environment. It's been over 5 years. Remember, 2021 is when interest rates went way up. So we've got 5 full years of people paying the bills on the higher interest rates. Anybody who got a loan in 2020 at low interest rates, 2019 at low interest rates, 2018 at low interest rates, they are 6, 7, 8 years in that property now. Okay. And that's plenty of time for a lot of life to happen. for babies to be born and a house to be too small, or for kids to grow up and go to college and, and mom and dad don't need that many rooms anymore, whatever, life happens. Does that make sense? So the churn rate is coming up anyway on a lot of these houses. That's increasing the number of people who are going to, sell a house and buy another one. The number of people who are going to downsize. Remember we talked before, if they try to stay the same size, with a higher interest rate, that doesn't make any sense. But in order to tap that equity, because interest rates are higher, they have to sell. That equity is trapped because they don't have a low interest way to get it out. They can't just get a 3% interest home equity line of credit. That doesn't exist anymore. Okay. So in order to tap the equity, in order to make the move, they have to sell the house. They can't refinance it because their payment would be too high and they wouldn't be able to afford both payments, right? So that trapped equity means they need to sell, not want to sell. On the other side of the equation, that falling interest rate means buyers that need to buy, that need to right size, that they need the bigger house because they just had a baby or they're just about to, or, they're whatever reason they need that house. It's easier for them to get in. So you've got sellers who want to sell and buyers who want to buy. And our job is to connect the two in the middle and make a big fat profit. Okay. So in a soft market, in a super hot market, sellers don't need our help. In a soft market, they do. In a super hot market, buyers don't need our help. In a soft market, they do. Why? Because we, educated investors, know how to help a seller who needs help a buyer who might need help to buy, connect the two and get paid to do it. Okay. So that's the big things coming up in foreclosures. Foreclosures are shooting through the roof right now. They're getting way up there. And the change in interest rates is making it for a very, very profitable market for us because we've got a great mix of sellers and buyers, which we didn't have when everybody was holding on to their 3% mortgages for dear life. All right. So I hope that helps, guys. If you like videos like this, please give this video a thumbs up. Please like and subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss the future ones. And in the meantime, if you want to hear more about this, more about foreclosure investing, you can visit me at foreclosureinvesting.com. Or if you'd like a free walkthrough on where to get the funding to do all these deals, you can find that at secretlenders.com. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.